Good morning and welcome to another weekly live episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. It is April 17th, 2024, and this week we're talking about DJI Fly Safe unlocks. If you've ever tried to fly your drone near an airport or near controlled airspace, whether basic or advanced or as a micro drone pilot, you might have run into something that tells you can't fly or a Geo Zone is nearby. We're going to talk about what that is, how to deal with it, what it does and what it doesn't do, and then we're going to go through that and how to get around the unlocks. Finn's going to take the lead on this. We've also got Jen here as well today, so take it away, Finn.
All right, so as Ian was mentioning, this is the scenario. You show up to fly your drone. Maybe you've been hired to fly your drone. You show up to the site and your controller says, you can't take off here. This is a restricted zone. DJI has a number of different zones, Geo Zones, where taking off is either gives you an advanced warning or restricts takeoff completely. This is most likely for liability reasons. They don't want anybody, because you could go to Best Buy tomorrow and purchase a micro drone and then go fly it at YVR. But they don't want people to do that. They want there to at least be some sort of permissioning process. So we're going to talk about where do you need to get your drone unlocked, how to get it, considerations for micro drones, and then we can open it up to questions at the end.
And we should first set some foundation on this one as well. So we're talking about DJI Fly Safe geofencing system. So a lot of stuff we've talked about up to this point in all of our online stuff has been either nav drone or the NRC site selection tool. This is on your controller. The controller app will tell you whether or not you can fly. And we'll just get it right out of the way here. This has nothing to do with Transport Canada laws. It has some loose correlation to it, but this is a practical, the drone won't take off. Why won't it take off? So we're looking at a map that is provided by DJI.
Yes. So on the map, there are the two zones to be concerned about are the blue zones and the red zones. So the blue zone is an authorization zone. In the authorization zone, all you need is an authorized DJI or a verified DJI account to take off. So you don't need to get any special permission, but you need to have logged in and set up your account. For the red zone, this is the restricted zone. In the red zone, a user must get permission to unlock. So you have to request an unlock from DJI. So these red zones are normally around airports and some Class F. You would need a DJI unlock to fly in one of these red zones, even if you're flying a micro drone. The map up here that I pulled, this is for Chilliwack. You can see the red box around the Chilliwack airport. This is actually set to the micro drone filter.
So this is DJI's Fly Safe website. And this is the same map that is loaded into the controllers and cached offline. And this is what it pulls the geofencing from. So you can see at a high level, it looks kind of similar to, like I said, nav drone and everything else. And this is a common question we get. Tons of questions about this all the time. This is not Transport Canada law. This is not any law. This is DJI has worked with some sort of regulatory body and gotten some suggestions. And in some cases, they have followed airspace specifically. But let's zoom into Chilliwack, for example, here. And you have 4 different shades on this layer. So right now I'm using a Mavic 3 Pro and I'll switch it to a Mini 3. Essentially is the same.
It just gets rid of the gray layer, which is like the max altitude layer.
That's right. There's a vertical geofence as well as horizontal geofences. So let's look at it from a micro drone perspective. Now, foundational again, just so we're on the same page here. The micro drones, if it's under 250 grams, so 249 grams or less, there is no licensing nor certification or registration required for a micro drone to fly in any Class G, F advisory, C, D, or E, or A or B airspace in Canada, right? So there is no authorization process for a micro drone in Canada other than if you were to fly it in Class F restricted airspace, which is prisons, wildfires, emergencies, etc. The golden rule is the CARS 900-06, which is don't be an idiot, don't fly the drone in the vicinity of an aerodrome in the pattern, don't fly it in a way that could endanger people or aircraft. Way back at the beginning of this year's series, we talked about that drone flying in the vicinity of Chilliwack in the pattern. Not a great idea. So we need to kind of reiterate, there's a reason these geofences exist. They are to protect the aerodrome or the airport facility from inexperienced or unaware drone pilots from just showing up and flying in the circuit pattern. We're looking at, like I said, CHOAC, and you've got 3 layers. You've got the outer layer. When you click on it, it'll give you the enhanced warning zone. You click on the blue zone. Now you've got an authorization zone, which is from the surface and up. And then you get closer to the aerodrome, and you've got the red, which is a restricted zone that Finn was talking about.
So in the enhanced warning zone, it's just going to, on your controller, say, this is an enhanced warning zone. People who take the flight review here in Langley, they have to deal with this because we're in Class G airspace, but we're in an enhanced warning zone. For some reason, Pitt Meadows, 7th busiest airport in Canada, is not a restricted zone, but Langley is, which is interesting to me. Pitt Meadows is a much busier airport than Langley.
And the reason why it's also interesting is because they're both Class C airports. So I'd always thought about this because Abbotsford as well is not a red zone. Right. There's no restriction on Abbotsford. It's blue, so it's authorization. And we'll get into the differences details wise a little bit more here in a second. But Langley is also a Class C control towered airport. Pitt Meadows, it's not as nested in an urban area as Langley. Langley is completely surrounded by buildings. The approaches, you're flying over houses. It's low terrain. Langley's in a bowl, so it's surrounded by higher terrain. So the chances of a drone being in the approach path is higher, whereas in Pitt Meadows, it's flat.
So once you've determined that you're in a place that requires an unlock, you actually need to take the steps to get the unlock. It's fairly straightforward. You just need to gather all of the documents required. You need to apply for the unlocking license on the DJI website, and then if they approve your unlock, they will send you, I think it's like a code, and then you punch that code into your controller. The drone will take off.
Okay, so here's an unlock request so that I don't have to hit the automatic unlock every time on a blue zone. And it's the same process for a red zone. It's just going to be a bit more involved, and it's going to have someone manually review it. But this is the automatic unlock for a Mavic 3 going into a blue zone. And we're going to do this so that in the event that we didn't have cellular reception, we could do this ahead of time and then preload it onto the drone, eliminating that step when we get there. So first we choose the blue zone that we want to unlock. Then we're going to choose the time frame that we're going to need it for, and it's a 2-day window. So we'll say today until Monday. And then we're doing a pre-unlock so that in the event of poor cell reception, we've got the unlock already preloaded into the drone. And it's an automatic approval in this case, and you'll see it shows up on your account. And now you're going to connect your drone to your controller using the DJI Fly app and preload the unlock into the drone's firmware. So let's jump ahead to that. Okay, so once you've got your drone connected, make sure that you're logged into your pilot profile, and then connect the drone, make sure you've done all your firmware updating and everything is up to date. Another thing you're going to want to double check is that your drone Fly Safe database is current and up to date as well. So you scroll down to About, over to Fly Safe, check your version, and it's going to tell you whether or not you need a new Fly Safe update. In this case, the firmware is up to date, and the Fly Safe data, it's going to check for update, needs a new Fly Safe database. Now you're going to want to download this and then install the latest version. This is going to be the up-to-date Geo Zone information for your drone that gets preloaded onto the GPS hardware. Once the Fly Safe database is up to date, it's always good to double check again and make sure that there isn't any other outstanding firmware or updates, because sometimes there might be multiple patches that need to be done to bring it up to date, especially if you haven't flown this drone in a while. Once you know that the firmware is up to date, then you're going to need to go into the settings and load in the custom firmware. So you're going to go into the top right menu. So in the safety menu, you're going to go all the way down to Unlock Geo Zone, and you're going to go to Import to Aircraft, the license. And this is the CHOAC zone that we just got, and it's now been imported to the drone. So during this time window now, the drone will not ask to be unlocked if you're in that blue zone. And then if it were a red zone, it would allow you to take off during the time that it's allowed and the fact that it's valid. And you can always hit the refresh to make sure there's no other outstanding. But at this point, you're good to go.
You cannot get an unlock unless you have a DJI account. Same as you cannot fly more than 150 feet away from your takeoff point unless you have a DJI account tied to the controller. The controller has to have an internet connection through cellular or tethering or something while you're trying to apply for the unlock. in the spot that you're trying to take off from, once it has a GPS fix, it will then say unlock required, authorization zone. It'll pop up and say request unlock. And then you'll get an embedded tiny little web page that is in the browser window on top of your controller. So that's why you know you need the internet connection. And there's 3 checkboxes. I agree to fly safely. I understand the risks and I assume all liability for the operation. You click those, you'll then be sent a verification text code, or it happens just before. That text, it's like a 2-factor authentication. So it'll have to go to your cell phone. So you need your cell phone, punch those numbers in, and then you will then be able to fly the drone for the duration of that battery. As soon as you power cycle the drone, you will lose the unlock. You have to go through the process again. Super frustrating if you're trying to fly FPV, like the Avata 2, the original FPV, because you have to tether your phone to your goggles the entire time you want to fly it, which means you have to have a USB cable going to your phone. We're going to go through all this in the video.
What documents do you actually need? So you need the flight controller serial number. You need the coordinates. Like if it's a radius, you just need the coordinates of the central point. You need the radius and height of the area you want to fly. The unlock duration, which for individuals can be up to 1 year. So it's similar to the SFOC. You can request to have it unlocked for a year. And then you need some sort of permission, proof of permission from the authority. So in Canada, in our case, that would be either permission from NavDrone or permission from the controlling agency of a Class F restricted airspace.
But the unlock is, if you get it for a year, it's only for that area. And if you fly in a different area,
Exactly.
you need another unlock.
Exactly. So if you lived in Langley, near the Langley airport within the red zone, you could request the unlock for the year to be able to fly in your backyard for the whole year.
Yeah. And it's going to be, depending on the risk, it's going to be quarter mile, half mile. It's not going to be a huge area. It's not going to be a blanket unlock. How do you deal with this if you're in a location that doesn't have cellular signal? In the majority of the areas where there are unlock zones, they are likely to be in cellular signal because they're in the surrounding of an aerodrome, and there's a pretty good chance of there being cell. What the unlock is it's a temporary modification to your firmware that is GPS time oriented. You can get that firmware before you leave cell range if you pre-request it on the red unlock. And I believe you can go back in and request a blue unlock in the same fashion. They would just automatically give it to you because there's not a check and balance process. Most situations I've ever run into it, I've not had a problem with cell service. If it's a circumstance that came up, then you'd probably have to rely on something like Starlink and then use an IP phone to get a text message or use iMessage or something else.
There's the site there. It's flysafe.dji.com, unlock request list. And then you just punch in all the information and follow the steps on the website.
This is your portal that you would see on the unlock request. So it kind of, again, similar to NavDrone, but not. This was a custom unlock in a red zone at the Vernon Airport, which is a certified aerodrome. I think this was the Air 2. Yeah, it was Air 2. And so you get a unique tracking number. So I was in the authorization and I was actually right on the approach down here by this gas station. So within like 150 feet of the final approach for the airport. I was really close. It was a real estate shot. The challenges that I faced when getting this was it's uncontrolled. There is no tower. There is no NavDrone authorization. It is just like Cholak. There's no one to give you permission for it. So I contacted the airport manager and I explained what I was going to be doing. We discussed a safety plan, and in turn, I emailed him some details about my risk assessment. He then responded with the conditions of allowing me to do it, so when I would be allowed to do it, how to do with it, and he asked that I also carry a radio so I could monitor the local frequency. Of course, I was an advanced pilot, so that's one of the things that was required in order to do this. You have to be an advanced pilot because it's a certified aerodrome. I was basically able to get in the air, listen to the circuit traffic, because it's a busy airport for new pilots, and I would hop up in between aircraft that were working the circuit, get the shots I needed, and then descend back down. Not more than 100 feet in the air at any point. I had probably less than a quarter mile radius that I was allowed to fly the drone. It was a very tight circle, specifically for a certain time. And so what happens is this firmware, so this unlock gets sent to my DJI account. I open the controller and it has a new firmware unlock pending. I then synchronize it to the drone, so it loads it into the drone's basic firmware, and then time and date and location flight was allowed. if I had been like to the south in the authorization zone, I wouldn't have ever have to talk to DJI. I just do the blue zone authentication for it. The DJI unlock, first off, there's no correlation between the level of license or certification you have on your drone to the color of the circles. So these blue circles and these red are geographic proximity to, so in this case, the one that's on the screen right now, that's a Chilliwack, that's pretty much the runway. So in Chilliwack, you needed an advanced license because it's an airport, not an aerodrome. But if we went to Hope, you don't need an advanced license because it's only an aerodrome. The same rules apply in terms of practically operating the drone. The level of certification changes because of either the airspace type, which is Class G in this case, but Class C in Abbotsford, or the type of airport. If it's got an operating certificate, then it's the 3 nautical mile radius around the airport that you can't operate as a basic pilot. DJI doesn't ask about that stuff. They don't care about that stuff. What they're looking for is, do you have permission? In Chilliwack, if I wanted to fly at Molson Brewery, for example, as a advanced pilot, not because of the airspace, but because of the proximity to the airport, DJI's not going to ask me whether I'm an advanced pilot or not. They're going to ask, do you have permission to fly here? Because it's a red zone, they want to see some sort of form of permission. The only person I need permission from is Molson to operate the drone from their property, but then also I need to demonstrate authorization from the Minister of Transport. And so the way to do that, and this kind of segues into the last slide on the micro side as well, is to lay out what the Canadian aviation regulations are that allow you to be authorized to fly by default in this area because I have an advanced certificate, my drone is registered, I am aware of the established procedure for the vicinity of this airport, and then I've got permission from the landholder.
So this comes up a lot with micro drones because there's no permission per se for micro drones. The Canadian aviation regulations stipulate that you basically already have permission to fly the micro drone, that anybody who has it, and as long as they're abiding by 900,
even foreign pilots,
even foreign pilots, they already have that permission. Here's the thing though. You can request permission in NavDrone for any operation. If it's in Class G airspace, if it's with a micro drone. You just have to make sure that it's set for micro drone.
It isn't a right because it is an authorization by the minister that the rules are in place. It's kind of like your driver's license is a privilege.
So you have you have the ability. What this means is, and I planned this operation last night, this is right at you can see Chilliwack Airport on the left hand of the screen there. I requested permission to fly the micro drone near the Chilliwack Airport, a stone's throw from the threshold of the runway, sent through the permission request in NavDrone and generated the permission request. And you can see at the bottom there that this flight was allowed. If I needed to get the DJI unlock, I could, because at the end when you use NavDrone, when you plan an operation, when it is approved, they give you the form that says that you're allowed to fly there. Yeah. That could be used as your proof to DJI that you have got permission from the minister to fly.
And one of the last things you're talking about getting is the flight report. At the end of the authorization, there's a PDF. I would take that PDF and push it towards DJI. So that way you've got your proof of authorization of the flight from an official source.
This is how a micro drone pilot could get this permission, could get the DJI unlock.
Yeah, it's the DJI authorization.
The last thing we need to talk about is Class F restricted airspace. Yeah. Because Class F restricted airspace is not necessarily only through NavDrone. You also need to talk to the controlling agency of that Class F restricted airspace. If you are needing to fly in Class F restricted airspace and you need to contact the person who is in charge of that airspace, the place where you need to look is the designated airspace handbook.
For permanent leave.
Yeah. This has the contact information of whoever is controlling that airspace, and then you would have to request permission from them, and they would probably, similar to what you were talking about when you were in Vernon, is they would probably have a back and forth with you, ask you exactly when you're doing it, give you a specific window where you can do it, and a specific area that you could do it. From the CFS, this is the Abbotsford Airport, and the Class F restricted that's there, that is the Matsqui prison, I believe. For flights near a military facility as per the CARS, you need a special flight operations certificate. For flights within a certain distance of a D&D owned airport.
or inside their controlled airspace.
Or inside their controlled airspace.
And that's for 250 grams or larger.
Yeah.
Standard small drones. Micros, the SFLC category does not apply. If we look at the drone laws in Canada, it's all CARS Part 9 or 900 series. The 900 decimal whatever stuff applies to all drones. 901 decimal whatever applies to small drones, which are drones from 250 grams up to 25 kilograms at this time. That will change. And then 903 applies to all small drones in the circumstances that are spelled out. So 903 is anything to do with special flight operations certificates. So if you want to break any of the rules that are in 901, that's where the instructions on how to do it is in 903. Micro drones are excluded from 903. So events, overheight, etc., those are all not applicable to micro drones. They just go by the golden rule. With the Class F restricted stuff, you mentioned the designated airspace handbook. Ad hoc airspace, so stuff that's spooled up randomly or circumstantially, is going to be potentially a nav drone is the best place to start. And then if it's not there, it's going to be in the collaborative flight planning services. You can go back a couple episodes and look at, it was called CFPS, or we're doing weather planning. NOTAMs are also in there. Those are going to show you potentially the controlling agency or a contact for it. So like 2021, we had that huge flood in the Fraser Valley. I had a bunch of people calling, asking us to go out and do some emergency response for utilities. Like gas and power companies wanted me to go and check their facilities. I couldn't get to the bottom of who owned the airspace. It was very unclear, and I contacted the police, the local police first, because it's a local emergency. They didn't know who owned it. And by the time I was starting to get answers, the customers had already sent a bucket truck and solved the problem anyway. It was a little frustrating as a business owner to not be able to react quickly, but at the same time, we've got to err on the side of safety and legality. Try and figure out as quickly as possible, if you're in that kind of circumstance, who owns the airspace. We're going to bolster this with a practical demonstration of both the FPV drones and like the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 2 and the Phantom. So using Go 4, we'll get that one out. The software has changed a little bit over the years, but the practical process has not changed. It's been the same since the Phantom all the way up. All this process will apply specifically to DJI products. Every other manufacturer may or may not have a similar. I know Autel has geofencing on some of their products. Some of them don't. In other countries, you'll have other parallels, like the DJI Unlock system is going to be the same in the States, but you also need to think about land, sea approval, and then whether or not you need a Part 107 for where you're going to be flying. Because if there's different circumstances in the States than what we've talked about here.
I'm a real estate photographer for the Qualicum Beach area. You said there's two ways of doing sort of an unlocked in sort of controlled airspace. Just wondering, what do you find is faster, using Nav Canada or just calling the Airdome directly in terms of getting that permission?
So let's bring up Qualicum Beach real quick here on Nav Drone, just so we're all on the same page. First off, layers wise, I've got this thing. So when you open up map.navdrone.ca, it defaults to basic. So I'm going to go to advanced because I'm already seeing a big red circle, and that's most likely controlled airspace. Let's say we want to do the Eagle Crest Golf Course. I'm going to click on it, and it's uncontrolled airspace, but it is a certified aerodrome. First glance, there's that. That must be, that's the heliport. And that's probably also, it's registered but not certified. So there's no limitation there. That's just a cautionary circle. You cannot be a basic pilot and fly a 250-gram drone or bigger within this orange circle. Without looking at the VNC, I'm going to guess it's Class G airspace.
It is Class G airspace.
Yeah, exactly. There is no one to give me airspace permission. This comes back to, this is a privilege question. So what I would do is, if you need a DJI Fly Safe unlock, so let's bring up that map as well.
The DJI unlock requires an additional document for the permission for the unlock, because I'm an advanced drone pilot. And so I was like, okay, well, what file am I going to be uploading to them to get this permission?
Okay.
Especially for the fact if I had called them to get permission from there.
Yeah, so there's no one to phone, right? I've got the DJI Fly Safe map up now. We've got the majority of the area. Like if I were doing the golf course, it looks like it's a blue zone. So that means that I would just squeeze the sticks together to start the props. It would then tell me I need to unlock on the controller. I would put in the 3 check boxes, get my text message, and then I'm off to the races, right? Because I'm accepting responsibility. That's fine. Let's say you're at Heritage Forest. I don't know if that's a park or not, so I'm not going to say you can fly there, but let's say you're there and you want to fly in the red zone. So now you need some sort of proof of authorization. So what I would do in that situation, go back to NavDrone. I'm in the map view. I would go to the portal view. I would create a flight plan as an advanced pilot. It would then say exactly that. It's going to give you the PDF of your flight authorization report saying this is authorized, everything's fine. I would then take that to the GeoZone unlock page showing that I'm authorized to do it and request the time, date, altitude, and size of the spot I need to fly. That should unlock you and give you that firmware for the duration of the time you need to fly it. No conversations with anyone, no emails. And I would load in your flight plan in NavDrone with your license number and everything else. So it is a full authorization, and then fly as you plan it. Nav Canada doesn't look at these unless they're doing a request review. And this is an untowered airport. So again, it's very much. So go back to CARS 901, 76 or 73, the operation within the vicinity. So have a scanner, have a radio frequency scanner that you can listen to the traffic frequency so that you know that if and most likely if the wind are coming from the southeast, airplanes are going to be on short final to the runway, probably doing a left-hand circuit by default into Qualicum.
It's a right-hand circuit so that the circuit pattern's always not over the town.
So knowing where they are, they make a downwind call, you know where to expect them. So then if I hear someone's turning base and on the southeast facing runway, I'm probably going to land just to be safe, to give that extra buffer between it. Qualicum is an area where there's no permission. There's privilege that is granted by the fact that you've passed the advanced test, you've passed the flight review, so you're good to go by default as long as you follow the safety rules.
I try and do my unlocks the day before. There's some parts in that area where there's no cell reception, or it's like really iffy.
That's a great point, and it kind of reinforces what Boyko was talking about with the cell reception.
Yeah. So the CYR at Ottawa is an orange zone. It's not a red zone. If someone were to rock up there with a micro, they would say, well, the app's...
Because it's the RCMP that controls that CYR.
You cannot fly at Parliament without permission.
Please don't, especially with a micro drone, any drone. 2 years ago, I went to Ottawa. I had some cross-Canada work, and one of the locations we shot was Ottawa. And we used both the Mini 3 Pro and the Mavic 3 to fly this new construction that's going between Ottawa and then the adjacent city in Quebec. So you can go so far in up against the CYR. And I didn't need to go into the CYR, so I didn't even bother going through the request process, even though we've done it before for other jobs. It was very difficult if you just rely on the DJI map drone, you don't know where the CYR is. So you either need to have your phone open at the same time or have some sort of dead reckoning reference. So what I did is I looked at where it was going to be, and I looked for landmarks on the map. And then I knew that if I didn't fly past this waterfall or the dam or this tower at the north end and the south end, I would be safely outside of the CYR. Because otherwise you have no idea if you're only relying on the DJI map. It does not match. And that's a good example of where it probably should. And in the States, there are places that DJI Fly Safe is specifically aligned with something like a nuclear power plant, for example. Right? Critical infrastructure, there are places where this is protecting what's underneath.
DJI does not, this is not based on the Canadian aviation regulations.
Pull up Banff National Park. So I did a road trip with a family, and I brought my drone, get to Banff National Park, and I didn't have to turn the drone on or anything. There's a big sign there, no drones. I just had got my advanced license at the time. I'm trying to understand, is it wildlife? Because as you guys know, like if there's a forest fire, right, that all gets updated. You can't operate within that vicinity.
There's a bunch of reasons. There's an amendment coming to the Parks Act and to the Aeronautical Information Manual, because right now there's multiple different regs for both provincial and national parks. And it comes on the provincial side, it comes down to the province. Some provinces have authorization zones that you can fly drones under supervision or permission from the warden. Some parks like BC have a blanket no. Federally, national parks, it's a blanket no from the ground, from within the property. And there has been communication that even the overflight of a park is going to be prohibited because the language that's in there right now was meant for traditional manned aviation, right? It was 2,200 feet above ground, and it's more of a should, because if weather predicates, you can fly closer to the ground, but not near wildlife, not near people, etc.
It's just avoid overflight of parks by 2,200 feet AGL.
It is a hard no from the federal side, and the laws are going to catch up with that hard no. And I'll give you personal experience. I've done a bunch of wildlife documentary work in helicopters in years past. It's easier to get permission to fly a helicopter in a national park than it is to fly a drone in a national park. The rules, the way they are written right now, do not fly in parks. Do not fly in national parks especially. It's just there have been enforcement actions that are staggeringly substantial. 2 years ago, someone was caught flying not only in Jasper National Park, but also within a restricted airspace of a wildfire.
Yeah, I think that person ended up getting hit with $20,000 of fines.
There's a public database that you can go to for notices of enforcement, and you just search for RPAS, RPAS, and you can start seeing what other fines have been handed out. The don't be an idiot rule, the 900.06 rule, has been enforced. We've definitely hammered to the fact that DJI does not align with Transport Canada on this, so don't just rely on your controller for Fly Safe unlocks. Ask us questions about this, or we can discuss it more in the comments and YouTube after the fact. Hopefully the unlock process was valuable to you. If you want to see more like that, let us know. Please hit that like and subscribe button. We are ramping up. We love to see all the comments and everything that we're getting and questions about this stuff. Thanks for joining us this week. And we talked about DJI Unlock. So we'll see you next time.